In the last video about this Star Wars Legion speeder truck, I did some chipping, some panel lining, some oil work, and some initial dust effects. If you want to see that video, it's up here, assuming I remember to put the link in. And this one, in this video, part 2, I'm going to continue doing the weathering. I'm going to do more earth effects. I'm going to do some streaks, some fluid stains, probably some rust stains, a few other things, and finish it up. Now I've already got a dust effect along the lower part of the model here, and I used Vallejo Model Wash Desert Dust for that. Now I want to add a little more to it, but I want it to be a little darker to look like some mud splashes and stains. Not a lot, but just some additional color, mostly just to give it a little depth and a little visual interest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this European dust and I'm just going to mix the two together 50-50 and sponge those on, but concentrate more right around the lower edge, just like I had done the dust before. Now here I'm going to be a little more precise in my placement. I'm going to do it neither willy nor nilly, but keep it focused mostly down here along the bottom. As before with the dust, I'll put it on in multiple layers because this is an additive method of weathering as opposed to subtractive like you would do with oils or enamels. I'm going to put it on just a little at a time until I get the effect that I want. Now, if you were going to do this with, say, oils, you could put more on and then blend it back with thinner or something like that, and get the desired effect. And you can mix. I mean, you can't mix them, but you could put down some acrylics and then put some oils over it once the acrylics were cured, or reverse it. You could put down some oils and then once it was dried, put some acrylics. That's what I'm doing over the panel lining. I'm putting some acrylics over oils. But this will just give it a look like, because what I'm thinking about, as I talked about in the last video, I see this thing going through a high desert area that's going to be cold. So on the base that I'm going to build, that I'm going to put together, there's going to be some snow. But that's going to mean snow at times is going to melt. That's going to mean there may be some mud. It's going to mean there may be some splashes. So that's what I'm trying to convey here with this. Remember, it's all about telling the story of your model. And you get to decide the story of your model. All right, you can see those additional mud stains. It's not a huge difference. I wasn't trying to make it super muddy, just to indicate some additional color there and some variation, just to give it a little more depth. As I was putting the mud on, I know this is a sci-fi vehicle and you don't think about real world things often when you're designing a sci-fi vehicle, but for a speeder that's going to be moving along the ground, that is the worst place for what I'm assuming are the air intakes for the engine. that would be, it's just like a vacuum cleaner for dirt and dust. But they're going to lose a few turbine blades with that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some mud splatter effects. Again, just along the bottom, but I'll allow these to go up a little higher because if you've ever looked at the side of a Jeep or a truck or any vehicle that goes out in the mud, splatters go much higher than necessarily the rest of the dirt and the dust will sometimes. So I want to represent that. Now, to just add additional tonal variety, very subtle, I'm just going to go with the European dust this time. It's not going to be a mix of the two, but it's just going to be the straight European dust. Now for this, I'm just getting this cheap flat brush here, and I'm going to just start testing it on a toothpick to see when I get the splatter pattern that I want. And then I'm just going to start splattering that on there, just like this. You can do this as many times as you want, go as heavy as you want, and just get it exactly like you want it. There is no right or wrong. I mean, unless you're trying to replicate a particular vehicle in a particular photo, you determine what it's going to look like. And one of the great things about this acrylic product is that it dries really fast. If you want to speed up the drying time, you can always pull out a hairdryer and get it dry really quick. It tends to work okay with it. I haven't had any problems with using a hairdryer to speed up the drying time. All right, you can see how that looks now. It's got plenty of splatters on it, and you can see some various subtle shades and colors going on there. It just contributes to that depth of finish that I think gives a model a nice look. And I mean, if you've watched the previous video, and if you're watching, of course, what I'm doing now, I've not done anything really complicated. Just a few simple products. And so I've deliberately been using, fairly cheap tools, very common tools to do it. And most of it is just layering on different colors at different opacities and just trying to make it look dirty. And the more you layer it on in thin layers, the easier it is to achieve that goal. So I'm pretty happy with this so far. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to do some fluid stainings. And I'm going to start off with just some brown colors, raw umber oils, and an acrylic umber wash. This is Vallejo Game Wash. And if you're familiar with Citadel shades and things, this is very similar to Agrax Earth Shade or something like that. So it's just an acrylic wash. Now, each of these has their strengths in what they can do. The oils, and again, what I'm going to say for oils generally applies to enamels if you use those. The oils can be blended, they can be easily streaked. You can really work with the opacity. They have a lot of configurability, but they're not always easy to just get if you just want stain effects. That's where I think acrylics work better. With acrylics, you can't do the blending as easily as you can with oils. You can't do the streaking. You have to be a little more deliberate in the application of those kinds of things, although you can use them for them. But where they're really good is in putting down stains around something. So what I like to do is use both. And by using both, it really contributes to the depth of finish and gives you a really nice look. I generally put the acrylics down first because they dry really easily and really quickly. And then once they're dry, I can put, and cured, then I can put the oils down over them and give them a little longer to dry. Now for applying the acrylic, let's say I want to have a stain around this feature down here. I'm going in with it unthinned. It's not thinned right now. And I'm just going to kind of put it in around it like this, just a little bit at a time, just using this cheap liner brush. Just going to put that in there. It gives a good basis of color. And you see I'm just stippling it around like that. Good basis of color. And just stain around like that. And then I just damped my brush in a little bit of water. Just before this gets dry, I'll go in, just kind of blend it around like that. This is just giving me color around that. That's all I'm going for. Same way if I wanted to do something further up on the model. Let's say I want to have some stains up here. I can just go in and just start developing where the stain is going to be. Just like this. And this is just going to kind of represent the older, dried up area. And then I'll, again, clean my brush off and just play with that just a little bit, just to blend it. You don't get as much time to blend with acrylics, but if you work with them in small quantities, your path to success is not far away. Now, I've just created those areas just below there and just below there, and they're real subtle. I mean, you can go as strong or as subtle as you want. I'm starting subtle because I know I'm going to be putting some oils over this. If I were going to be doing this just with acrylics, let's say I wanted to have a streak. Let's just pull one down just from right up under here. If I just wanted a streak right there, well, I can just take that liner brush and just stipple that in like that. And then again, clean my brush off, damp off the water just a little bit, just kind of blend out the end of it here, just like that. And then I've got a streak. That'll dry in just a few seconds. So it can be really fast to work with acrylics. But as you'll see when I do the oils, you get a lot more flexibility with how you blend the oils. Now, one of the areas that I think acrylics really do a nice job of imparting stain is fuel stains. So I'm going to imagine that these two circles are fuel filler caps. Now, what kind of fuel do they use a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? I don't know. Maybe it's something like gas, maybe it's something like diesel, maybe it's, made from ground up Ewoks or something like that. Whichever it is, we're going to call it brown. And I'm just going to put that in there like that and just kind of dance the brush around. Let it just deposit color. Let it run onto itself. Let it just kind of go where it wants. And just put in varying layers of opacity and things like that. And get a little water on my brush, just like I was doing before. Just go in, stipple it some more, work it around. The beautiful thing about putting on stains and stuff is there's almost no wrong way to do it. It's a stain, You can imagine it to be whatever you want to be. So as you put them on, you can come up with your own story for why that stain is there, how it happened. Most models, I'll probably do it on this model at some point. Most models, I put something on that in my mind, I'll just use the word, I pretend that it is a coffee stain. And I think about somebody was doing some work on the vehicle one morning, and spilled their coffee. And I know this can happen because I remember doing it one time working on my Humvee when I was in the Army. And I had my coffee sitting on the top of the vehicle, and it got spilled, and it ran down the side and left a stain. So whenever I do that, I just think about my own experience. So it's something fun you can do. Think about the experiences you had, real experiences. Build them into your model. Now, another way I like making little subtle stains, things like that, is just taking a drop of acrylic, the acrylic wash. And again, this can be the Vallejo game color that I'm using. This can be a Citadel shade. It can just be really thin paint, but I like to put a dot like that and immediately go over to my water cup. And I just load the brush up with water. I just put a drop like that. And I wipe off the brush and I just come back, just kind of spread it out. Now what that does is it makes when it dries, a very, very subtle stain. Now, that can look like oil that drops down. It can look like mud splatters. It can look like whatever you want it to look like. Now, one of the things you can do is if you have 2 or 3 colors that are similar, say a black brown and a dark red brown and something like that, you can do that kind of stain, put one over the top and of the other, let it dry, put another one, and as you layer them, you just kind of get this cool effect. Like I'm going to use this, I'm using the same color here, but here's one I did earlier, and then I'm going to put one over the top of it. But it just gives a very cool effect to the surface. And you can thin them more or less, or even put some light stains down and then leave some darker ones on top of it, just to give it a cool look. Another thing you can do is when you add that water, sometimes, especially if you put the water down first, if I put a drop of water down like this, and then I go in and get just a little bit of the wash and put in there, sometimes what will happen is the color will kind of leach out to the edge of the water drop, and it's going to leave, I mean, they call it a coffee stain effect, but that's exactly what it is. It's a cool looking, almost coffee stain. See the one I just did? It's drying up. You see that coffee staining effect? You know, a lot of people complain about that because of acrylic washes, but that can be something that you can use to your advantage. That's why I think it's important, really, when you're wanting to get good depth of finish, that it's really important to learn to use oils, enamels, and acrylics, and even pigments, so that you can take the strengths of each one and apply it to your model and get precisely what it is you're looking for. So it's just a fun way to just use a little bit of your acrylic wash, a little bit of water, and get some stains in there in very interesting ways that, again, all contribute to that depth of finish. Now, in addition to acrylic stains, like I did, back here and a couple other places, fluid staining, certainly you can use oils and enamels. And I like using oils. One method to do it is to get your oil, and this is just the Winsor Newton raw umber. So it's just brown. Don't get hung up on the brand. The thing is, the color is brown. You want to get good oils. I wouldn't recommend going to, you can go to the art store and you can find one of those sets that's, 24 oil colors for $10. You're probably not going to have good success all around with that. It may just frustrate you. Get something that's more of a tube like this, Winsor Newton. I use this. People all the time say, "You use Winton? You can't use that. That's not high quality oil." Well, I've been using it for years. Sorry. I don't know what to say. The Abteilung 502, they make plenty of colors. I've been using this on this model. So, it doesn't have to be a super high end necessarily, but it does need to be a fairly good quality oil, and certainly enamels. But what I like about oils is they're thick. So let's say I want to put a stain coming down from this little thing right here and right here. Now I just put down just a tiny little blob of oil. Nothing substantial, but it's still a blob. Now what I'm going to do is, this is just a dry brush, and I'm going to start above it, and I'm going to draw it straight down, just like that. And then I'm going to go back over it and just kind of stretch it out. Because oils, you can push them around. You can push them around the surface. See how that one streaked a lot more? Because I put more oil down. My hands shake, and so a lot of times I don't have good control, but sometimes that helps me. So I've got that there. Now, what I've got in this palette well here is my VMS Oil Expert. And this it's a thinner for oils and enamels. and it shortens. I think it's for oils only. I would double check that if you had to order some. I use it for oils. It speeds up the drying time. Now, if you don't have that, then whatever you're using for your oils to thin them with, odorless enamel thinner, odorless terpenoid, whatever. But I'm just using this, and I'm using it just straight, just neat. And even though it's purple, it won't, it's not going to change the color. Now, I damped my brush in it, cleaned off the little bit of oil that was on it, and I just wipe off most of it. And now what I can do is I can start, for example, I can start pushing the oil back into the stain. See that? Push and pull it so that it's back in there like that. I can pull it down, streak it more. I can minimize it. See how that's just minimizing down? I can go in, I can pull it off, and I can clean it over here where it's getting a little heavy. Just clean it up and pretty much dial in the stain to be exactly what I want. Blend it out like that. Same way with up here. See, I can come in here, I can push it back into it like that. And because I'm coming at it from the other direction, I'm left-handed, I'll pull it back into it like this. And notice I'm just doing really small motions, just starting right at the edge and just slightly pulling back into it. And I can cut it off to a point like that. Clean up the outside by drawing it down. And so I can get some very refined stains like that. Now, the beautiful part of oils is if you decide you don't like it, well, you just get some thinner on a cotton bud like that, and you just pull it off, just like that. And then if you decide, no, wait, I want it there, you go back, you put it on, maybe you draw it down a little further with your toothpick. Now this brush is damp, but I can just use it to pull it down, just like that, get a different type of stain. Push it back up into it. See how you can manipulate the oils? It's really configurable. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's fun to just kind of play around with it like that, get it looking just like you want, and really, really just making things look like you think they should, you know? Like I can come under here and I can spread some oil right along under that. And I'm just rotating my toothpick as I do it so that I get some staining. And I got a little bit up on the panel, that's okay. Now I can come in here with, here I'll use this larger brush. I can just pull that down like that. See? Just like that. And if that's the stain you want, leave it. If you want to diminish it a little bit, I'm going to take this Q-tip that I already dipped into the thinners. I'm just going to dab it on there just a little bit. And see, it just picks up just a little bit of the color. So now I'm refining that. See the effect that gives? Look at that. And if I don't want it up here on this panel, I just come in, clean it off. If you're in a hurry, oils are not going to do it for you usually. But if you're willing to put in a little time, a factor in their drying and what that's going to entail, and then work with them a little bit, they do some beautiful things. Now back here where I did this stain with the acrylics, I did this several days ago. I've had to set this aside for a little while just for work and life and all of that stuff. But I can come in here and I can get a little thinner on this cheap liner brush, and I'm just going to work a little color in like that. And just get a very thin wash. And I can just kind of put that right over it like that. Then I'll go in, clean off my brush, wipe it off, and then take a little thinner and just touch to the top until I get a flow. See, I'm just putting some down there, and I just let the color flow. Now this generally works pretty well because it's truly a streak. I mean, you've put the oil on there, and it's going to go wherever you put thinner. So see, if I bring some down here, what's left in the brush will just flow down. And you can get a stain. If I want to, I can go back in and I can touch a little more oil in like this. And just let that capillary action, depending on where you live in the world, you just keep adding to it. I can make that stain as big or as small as I want. And because this is oil, I can give that thinner a few minutes to flash off, to dry off. And I can go back in just like I did up here and refine that stain. You see how it's doing? This is why oils are so configurable. See that? It's doing things that you just can't. Look at that pattern that's going in right there. You just can't do that easily just by hand. What this is doing is you're truly weathering it, because weathering is, to use a $64 word, weathering is serendipitous. It just happens. No one determines the weathering. Weathering determines itself. So when you apply these techniques and just kind of see what's going to happen, then it's truly weathering, because it's a random process. Now, if it looks good to you, you leave it. If it doesn't, like I said, you can clean it off, you can configure it, you can add to it. I could go back once this dries and put even more acrylics over it. I could put more oils over it. I could put a different color of oil over it. But it just adds to the depth of finish and the interest of that area of how it looks. Now, to show another place, this is where I'd put down the acrylic washes. And probably not the best use of acrylics and oils here, because they're pretty much the same color, so it's going to be hard to differentiate the two. But if you had different color acrylics and oils here, it would really stand out. But all I'm doing is just pre-wetting that area with some thinner, and then I'm just going to go in with some oil and just touch that in there and let that flow all around like that. Now the pattern, when it dries, is going to be slightly different. And see, if I want to bring it down over the side here, I can just do that. You see how that stain is real thick right there? If I just take some more thinner, look at that. It just flows down, just like that. I can configure this like I want. Again, I could come back in with my Q-tip and just dab around a bit, like that. Do that with 2 or 3 colors, and you have a really, really interesting looking fuel stain. Now, to talk briefly about using oils for earth effects, I'm not going to demonstrate them because I'm not going to use oils for earth effects, but you can use oils to do the same kind of stuff here I did, or enamels to do the same kind of stuff here that I did with acrylics. It's going to look slightly different. But again, if you just put some of the oil or some of the enamel along here and then blend it back up into the model, you may even want to turn the whole model upside down. So that way you're essentially streaking it down in terms of, where you have it pointed vertically. But you can do that with oils. Oils and enamels are really good if you want dust stains to be, to show dust collecting around features on your model. A light tan oil, a light tan enamel, something dust colored like that works really, really good. So it's great for depth of finish to just mix those around. If if you've ever watched Martin Kovacs, a lot of times he'll use like an airbrush or even acrylics to what he calls pre-dusting. He'll put down a layer of dust, a thin layer of dust all over something, and then he'll go back with oils or enamels and do a more involved dust effect, dirt effect, maybe chunky mud, things like that. So everything I'm doing can be done with acrylics, oils, or enamels. You can swap them out. Each has their own difference. Each has their own strengths and weaknesses. Each has their own little nuances for application. But the more you get experience in all of them, the more you'll have the ability to evaluate what it is you're trying to do and then approach it from the standpoint of what's the best tool to do this. And I don't necessarily mean, a paintbrush or a toothpick, but rather acrylics, oils, or enamels. All right, I'm going to take a little time and do all of the fluid stainings with this Umber, raw Umber oil paint, and then I'll give that some time to dry, and then I'll start looking at rust effects. Now, when it comes to adding rust stains, there are so many products on the market. I can't even begin to enumerate them all. Essentially, whether it's oils, enamels, or acrylics, you're just looking for something that's some variation of orange brown, orange yellow, orangish. It can lean very far into the brown. It can lean very far into the yellow. So don't get too hung up on, well, is it the right shade of rust? Older rust is generally going to be darker. Fresher rust is going to be a little lighter. But in scale, that distinction may not make a lot of difference. The key is rust is going to make something look older. Rust takes a little time to develop. So it generally gives age, indicates age. It indicates that it's been outside. It indicates that it's been beat up, used a lot, whatever. So keep that in mind. Now I'm going to start off with a couple of Vallejo products. Some of these model washes, dark rust and rust. The difference in the colors is very, very slight. I'm mostly using them just to demonstrate that you can use different colors. But what I'm going to do with this acrylic product is just go into some of the areas that I've already fairly heavily chipped, and I'm just going to start stippling it on around some of these areas. You can decide how much is too much or too little for your goals. I don't want to make this whole thing necessarily a rust bucket, but I just want to indicate that there is some stuff going on and that rust is a part of it. Now, is this canon? I don't know. I'm not too worried about that. I'm having fun. That's the main thing. But these areas like this, you see right there, if you get a little more than you want, clean your brush off, come back in, stipple it around. Remember, with acrylic products, it's an additive process. And you put on a little at a time to get the effect that you want. With oils and enamels, it's generally subtractive. Now, as with all the other weathering and stuff that I've used on this model, there's also plenty of opportunity to use oils. You don't have to use oils and an acrylic product like I'm doing. You can use one or the other. You can use neither. You can use enamels. You can use pigments. So just because I'm using two doesn't mean you got to do that. I like using oils for rust effects the same way I like using oils for streaks and stuff, because of its controllability, because I can manipulate it really well. So that's why I often make that choice. I use the acrylics for kind of an undercoating in some areas or larger areas, and then I use the oils or enamels for something more specific, more configurable. Now, for this, I'm using a couple from Wilder Weathering products. I don't think these are in production anymore, so they may be hard to find. But again, the point is they're oils, and they're just two different colors of orange. One's called orange rust and one's called fresh rust, but just different colors of orange. And as before, I've got my some terpenoid, odorless terpenoid in my palette, and I put in a few drops of the VMS Oil Expert just to speed up the drying a little bit. So what I'm going to do is sometimes things will get rusty, say on the inside, and oil, or not oil, but rather when water, they get rained on or they get wet or whatever, the rust will kind of bleed out and the color will actually bleed out. If you've ever seen anything rusty, you'll often see that around it, even if there's painted surface around it or still metallic surface around it that's not rusted, the rust tends to bleed, that color tends to bleed out around that. So what I want to do in this case is just simulate that, and just get a little pool of oil here, and I want to thin it out pretty good. Just want it to be flowy. I'm just going to put this up here around this guy right there, and put that on like that. And let's see, do we want to do it around anything else? Tell you what, we've got something rusting around here. Why? I don't know. 'Cause just did. And then I'm just going to get some thinner, and I'm just going to flood that around there. And I'm just going to let that sit for a little bit. Let that thinner flash off. And then go back and see what I want to do with it. Now I got some on the top of this door, or whatever this little hatch is. If I don't want that there, all I have to do is grab an Q-tip or an cotton bud, depending on where you are in the world. Clean that up. Very simple. It's the beauty of oil. Now sometimes things can get rust in a recess on something. Inside a screw or a bolt or an access hatch or something like that. And maybe water gets in there and it pools around, and when it does that, and then fluid starts getting into it, well, it starts coming from the inside out. And that's what I'm going to try and simulate here. And I've just got me a dot of rust there, the rust color. And I'm just going to start stippling that and spreading that and bringing that down. And at this point, all I'm wanting to do is just get color along there. I'm not worried about the shape. I'm not worried about if it's to scale. None of that is really a concern right now. But when I get it to this point, again, I just leave it be for a little bit. And I go find someplace else that maybe there's some kind of stain. Now here, I want to put some up there. And maybe this damage up here, some chipping up here, some wear and tear, some rocks or something that got blown up in there. They've created an area that's going to rust. And what I'm going to do there is I'm just going to grab my wide brush. I'm just going to pull that down like that. Doesn't have to be real obvious. Just real subtle. Just blend it down. If you out-subtle yourself, which I think I just did, you put a little more. A little more. Keep doing it till you get it like you want it. This is a very good area that you can pre-treat with an acrylic. I didn't, but it's a very good area that you could pre-treat with an acrylic and then come in with the oil over it. But you see, just a little bit of that orange creates what I think is an interesting stain. Now back over here, I've given it just a couple of minutes to dry. It's really just letting the thinner flash off, and all I'm going to do is just go in and just blend that. My brush is moist with thinner. It's not damp. I'm just going to go in and just push this pigment around to get it to look like I want. And I don't actually have, this is one of those serendipitous processes, to use a $64 word. I don't actually have a specific goal in mind. I'm just kind of pushing the pigments around, working on the knowledge that eventually I will hit what it is I'm looking for. And I will know it when I see it, and that's it. See? See how much I blended that back? And it just leaves just that little pop of color right there and a little streak there. But your brain looks at that and it definitely says, yeah, that's a rusty thing. And again, oils are configurable. You know, I put those up here just a couple of minutes ago. I could come in with some thinner, and I could just blend that out in the middle right there, push the pigments around a little, and reconfigure the whole shape of this thing. Just like that. Stipple it down, streak it a little bit, make it look a little more interesting. Whatever you want to do. Now, when you unmask your canopy, it's going to be really clean. So after I get it unmasked, I want to go in and dirty it up a bit. Certainly, you know, in a combat situation, or even just non-combat, you want your canopy to be clean so you can see out of it. But when you're driving around in the dust and all of that, and obviously this thing's beat up, it's got some age on it. You know, if you have a car, you know that as the car gets older, the windshield is just not as clear as it used to be. There's little scratches and things like that in it, and it's just gets aged. So I want to simulate that. So what I've done is I've taken some light buff, some more of this wilder oils, and I'm going to get some light buff, and I'm just going to thin it out on my palette. And I'm going to just put this all over the canopy like this. Now, this is one of those things that starts off looking really ugly. Really ugly. That's okay. Because we're going to work with it. All right, now that I've got it covered, I'm just going to start taking some thinner, and I'm just going to keep working this back, removing thinner, stippling it around, just using this cotton bud. Now I may have to go through quite a few cotton buds, because what I'm essentially doing is randomly removing the oil paint. And this is another one of those you'll know it when you see it techniques, and I'll just keep switching it back and forth like this. And you can do this several times. You can take it off. You know, it's not a bad idea to remove a little more than you intend on the first pass, and then go back and just touch up some areas. And also, as it dries, you can put in a wash around the edges so that it's a little thicker around the edges where the dust would gather and things like that. But just configure it. You can stipple it with a brush. You can stipple it with a cotton bud like I'm doing. You can, you know, anything that gets the effect that you're going for will work. Now, this is what I'm going to call my first pass on it. I'm going to let the thinner flash off, and then work with the oils that are left, because I do want to clear it up a bit more than this. But you can see the stage that it's at now, and I've gone in and I went ahead and put in kind of a wash along here, just letting that flow around, just letting it stand where it wants to, just to see how that's going to end up looking. Because the oils, again, the oils make it really easy to manipulate this. You could use acrylics with this. You have to be a little more judicious in your application and thin them out a lot more. There have been times I've used just matte varnish thinned with water and just stipple it around and do things like that. So there's a lot of different ways of getting your clear parts looking used. The great thing is if you have spare clear parts, you can experiment on them and see what works for what it is you're trying to do. Well, I think I'm going to call this one done. Off camera, I finished up the base. I just did a high desert kind of look. Desert with some snow. No particular motivation for it other than I just wanted to stick some snow on the base, but I also wanted a desert base. So put the gun up on top, put the antenna on, took off the masking, and one of the things that I haven't shown throughout these series of videos is the interior. But you can see it pretty well because I did not glue this part on. So there you can see the interior fully painted and with some figures in there. Those are just some other Star Wars Legion figures that I used. And I did this, actually did this painting, showed this on Patreon. But just painted the whole interior there. It's a lot of fun, plenty to paint in that. But the fit of that top is so good you can't tell that it can just pop right off. So that was kind of a fun discovery that I made and decided to take advantage of. There's also a second gun so that those can be swapped out and use whichever one somebody wants, because eventually this is going to go on eBay and I will be selling this. And I don't know whether somebody's going to buy it just for their model collection or somebody's going to buy it to use in the game, but I hope whoever does will enjoy it. If you've not ever built one of these Star Wars Legion kits, especially the vehicles, they're really, really good models. And whether you're, I don't play the game. I'm not a gamer at all, 0%. But I like a lot of the models. This is something from the Star Wars universe that you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's just very unusual and I think a very cool model. And there's others that you can build. And even if you're not a Star Wars modeler, I would highly encourage you to look beyond necessarily the genre that you build in, at least for, your video watching and your what you read on the blogs when you're looking for techniques and paints and colors and all of these other things. There's so much out there that can be applied to anything that you do that can be helpful in your modeling. So I just highly recommend looking for those things and seeing what's out there. And you never know where you're going to learn some new technique or some way of looking at something that might be very helpful to your own work. Well, thanks so much for watching this video. I am grateful. Thanks to the patrons who support me on Patreon. My family and I are grateful for your support. And I'll wrap up this video as I always do with my videos to say if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.
Are you building an airplane? Oh boy.